On today's show, we have Piers Ridyard, the CEO of RDX Works. Radix is the only smart contract platform that started from the problem of how to decentralize the 400 trillion global economy and working backwards. What were the initial problems that maybe you've seen in the market as a whole that this would solve?
Yeah, we think that public ledgers are going to be in the same vein as the internet. They're going to be a public service on which the entire wealth of the world is going to be represented, tracked, and contracted around. And that means that it's $400 trillion, right? Which is roughly what the total wealth, in assets of the world is, that which is already tracked, right? So if you go with the $400 trillion view, and you go, well, what is suitable today to be able to be the equivalent of the internet for $400 trillion in which the entire world can base that on? You go, nothing comes close. Nothing's anywhere near scalable enough, right? Like if you look at what the global financial system today is doing, it's like 2 to 20 million transactions per second. Between 2 and 20 million transactions per second is what global finance is doing today. And then you look at something like Solana and you go, well, it's 65,000 transactions per second. Or you look at something like Avalanche, which is 4,500. And you're like, it's not even in the same ball game. It's not, forget ballparks. It's a friggin', it's like, it doesn't even come close. Then 20 million transactions per second in the global financial system of today is probably 10, 100x that, at least in, the global financial system of tomorrow, if it's based on top of public ledgers. So we started from that problem. We went, okay, how do you create a consensus algorithm that can scale to that kind of level? And that's where Cerberus came about. Then we looked at the next problem and we went, what's the other problem that is with crypto? Well, the hacks and the exploits are insane. Like we've had $3 billion worth of hacks in the last 6 months. Like, how is that sustainable? How can anyone with a straight face go, this is the place that global finance is going to be? But in the last 6 months, about 10% of the total value, less than that. It's about 5%, 2% of the total value of the crypto space has been hacked. So the next thing is going, well, why is security so bad? And security comes down to this whole thing of like, Ethereum was an experiment in what you could do with smart contracts, but it didn't know what the purpose of smart contracts were. We now know they're financial transactions. We now know that they're financial applications. So let's start with a programming language and an execution environment that's actually built for financial transactions and financial applications, that's actually got security built around the primitives that are what finance technology is needed for. And let's solve that problem, because only when you have that are you going to be able to actually realistically with a straight face say this is somewhere that global finance can live, by actually removing all of the horrible ways in which the language causes people to get hacked and exploited with Solidity, with the EVM, and with all the ways that people program smart contracts today. And then the last thing that we look at as a structural inequity of the current crypto market is there is only 18,500 Web3 developers. Only 18,500 Web3 developers after 7 years of one of the most well-funded areas of technology, full stop. We've managed to get 18,500. Why? Because if you go and talk to them, we've spoken to almost 1,000 DeFi developers and projects in the last 3 years. If you go and talk to them, their job is really hard and it's really stressful and it's really boring. What they do, it tends to all be about 80-90% is on security. So what we've done is we've created an incredible funnel. We've created a programming language called Scripto that is incredibly easy to use and incredibly easy for people to get started with, to lower the barrier to entry and make it simple to get started with Web3, because it's only then that the innovation that is necessary to come into the space to be able to build what $400 trillion of financial instruments on top of a public ledger is going to look like. You need the talent. And so that's why Radix is different.
What is the difference between a distributed ledger technology and a blockchain?
You can think of a distributed ledger or decentralized ledger technology, DLT, is the category term, right? So like fish. And then blockchain is salmon. So all salmon are fish, but not all fish are salmon, right? Yeah. So blockchain describes a data architecture to do with how the data is stored on ledger. So you have a block of transactions that are all validated together. They get written to the ledger as one block, and then that block then creates the basis for the next block, so that you always have to strictly increase the number of blocks in an increment of one, and that you have a chain of events that you can go back through and look at. Now, That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have that data architecture to be able to build a DLT, a decentralized ledger technology, and that's not what Radix has done.
So why don't you break down Radix?
What Radix does is it is essentially, it's a DLT rather than the blockchain. And it has a massively sharded architecture that each of the transactions are written according to, and this gets a little bit technical, but if you have a wallet, your wallet lives on a shard and all of the data associated with that wallet also lives on that shard. And so you can have parallel processing. And the reason you can have parallel processing is if I have my wallet on my shard, or I have my wallet and you have your wallet, and you send a transaction to your mother and I send a transaction to my mother, right? On a blockchain, as it currently stands, the blockchain has to decide which of those transactions were literally first and which ones of them was second. They will literally order both of those. They will go, Joe's was first and Piers's was second. On Radix, it will go, well, they're not conflicting, so we don't care. We just care that they're valid. We don't care what order they're in. And so you go from single chain processing, like a CPU with a single thread, to multi-chain processing, like a GPU, where you have a way of making sure that the things that would conflict always happen on the same shards, the things that don't conflict don't, and then you can process them in parallel. And suddenly you open up just millions more transactions per second possibility just by starting with the data architecture. And that's why Radix isn't a blockchain. It doesn't have this single, chain process. It's a multi-thread process that allows you to get massive throughput basically from the start.
So can you break down exactly, you mentioned Cerberus, right? What exactly that does in more detail?
If you want to go to multi-chain and multi-thread, you have to have a way of allowing atomic composability. You have to have a way of making sure that even if you can have things happening asynchronously, if you need to synchronize multiple addresses together or multiple transactions together, there has to be a way that can happen. And that was impossible until our consensus algorithm, Cerberus, came out. So Cerberus is a new consensus algorithm that allows you to do multi-thread, asynchronous and synchronous processing on top of a public ledger so that you can go, okay, well, all of these are connected, so we'll operate consensus together on these. These are separate, so we'll operate separate consensus instances on that. So you can still have multi-threading, but you can make sure that you're able to coordinate between shards. And that breakthrough was the thing that stopped people doing multi-threading, because as soon as you do multi-threading, you break atomic composability unless your consensus algorithm deals with it, which is what Radix does.
What does Radix offer in regards to the developers?
Yeah, so it starts as we're still, before we've integrated the programming language into the public ledger, which happens next year. It's still around small competitions, small developer events. So we've now run, I think we've now done over 1,000 developers in our developer events. So sort of physical events where we'll go and teach people, or online webinars. A lot of it is education giving. So giving away how to do things, how to think in the right way, getting people on courses, getting people to sort of learn together. So one of our community members took the initiative to start his own learning course so that people could start building with it. You're seeing sort of meetups and things like that. That's where it starts. Then as we get closer to the mainnet going live, you're going to start seeing more things like developer grants come in. But again, making sure that it's the right thing that you're giving grants for. I think there's a lot of money that's been thrown uselessly in the crypto space, and there's a lot of ways in which it can be used much more strategically.
And last, let's leave off with the Radix token, right? Kind of what is the purpose it serves within the ecosystem?
Yeah, so the Radix token is, you can think of it very much like an Ethereum token or a Solana token or Avalanche token. It is the main token of the network. It lets you stake to secure the network, for which people who actively stake and secure the network receive staking income. You can use it to transact value if you want to. You can use it to pay for fees. There's a couple of things that I think are really interesting about the fee model. The fee model is similar to EIP 1559, those who are familiar with the Ethereum one, where you have tips and then part of it is burnt. But we also have this concept of delegated fees within the ecosystem. So you can have an application that can pay for fees on behalf of a user. So you can end up in situations where essentially, even if you don't have Radix tokens, you can still use the network. If the application that you're interacting with wants to pay your fees on your behalf, we think that's going to be massively important for driving sort of mainstream adoption, because we don't think it's sustainable forcing end users to have like these extra tokens in addition to the thing that they actually want to do with the ledger. And so I think there's lots of cases that's going to be powerful and helpful for the next wave of adoption.
For all listeners that would like to get a hold of you, learn more about Radix, where should they go? What should they do?
You can find out more about the decentralized finance protocol Radix on the website, radixdlt.com. You can follow on Twitter at RadixDLT. That's RADIXDLT. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Piers Ridyard. That's RIDYARD, PIERS, RIDYARD. And honestly, if you're a developer, then you can do much worse than just having a play around with Scripto, because I think it is the number one way of learning what Web3 is if you're a developer.